New rule of $100,000 payment for an H-1B visa. What does that mean for Canada on this edition of ImmPulse?
Hi, I'm Howard Greenberg.
Hi, I'm Nouman Hameed.
And Noman, this is a special day. Things are changing in the United States, and it has implications for Canada.
It's been a busy weekend watching all the changes and understanding what corporations are starting to think and what does Canada think about this kind of change.
Well, we've been thinking about it, and what we think is that this is an opportunity. It's an opportunity for many multinational companies to sidestep the United States and the huge fees and come to Canada with a lower dollar, a lower cost of living, and great opportunities for their employees.
All right. So when you're talking about cost, we know all over the media discussions about $100,000 additional fee, notwithstanding the salary requirement, which has gone up in the U.S., the U.S. currency. Potentially someone in Canada could be employed 30% less in terms of the currency exchange, no $100,000 fee. But isn't the challenge, all the discussion is about reducing foreign workers, and now we see this juicy population of potential workers. How do we reconcile that with Canadians' policy?
Well,
policy?
We're going to need a carve out for high-end, high-qualified workers for Canada. That's the key. And once we can get a carve out in place, a special policy, other workers may have to be deferred.
So that brings me to Minister Diab made one statement. We haven't heard about her plan yet, but one thing she said that I liked was we need to figure out a policy to attract the best global talent in a measured approach. And I think what you're saying is it may be a different mix, but now's the time to focus on which workers are going to drive the economy of Canada, help innovate, create jobs so that we can manage a lot of the challenges we're facing right now in the trade war.
Well, to be clear, there are no quotas now. So if a company called us up today and said, we want to shift 30 of our workers from Atlanta, Georgia to Canada, we would say, how fast do you want them? We wouldn't say that Canada immigration doesn't want them or won't admit them. If the documentation's right and they qualify, they come.
Agreed. And what I would say for employers thinking about making this kind of move, make sure you get the right advice. There was a time where many employers would consider an employer of record, but we know that ESDC has taken a very tight position on that structure, not very comfortable with foreign workers being employed by a third party. But to your point, maybe a proper branch being created thoughtfully with a Canadian basis and the transition of workers could be a real win for Canada.
Some legal advice, some tax advice, some advice in terms of where to settle, some socioeconomic advice. I think they're on their way. I think Canada has an opportunity here.
And there's some interesting discussion about whether there should be special consideration for, many international students in the U.S. are at the best universities around the world. They may not be able to get an H-1B visa, depending on how the policy shapes out. Canada could potentially tap into some of the best talent in the world right next door, facilitating entry to Canada, grow new businesses here. And the flip side we've seen is potentially a concern if we don't act, if the Canadian government doesn't develop a policy, would U.S. companies say we should consider Canada because we can't use the H-1B to attract from the rest of the world? So you better make a move strategically now from a policy perspective. Otherwise, we might suffer the consequences of not doing so.
Well, I think that your discussions are reality. As you well know, an Ivy League school has reached out to you for that discussion. What can we do for our students graduating? They may have minimal work experience, but they want Canada as their place of the future.
Opportunity knocks.
Opportunity knocks. Noman, I thought we would discuss a call I had earlier today from my prospective client. It's a U.S. company that has an office in India, and traditionally they would transfer quite easily between India and the United States, but the new fees discussed are prohibitive. And so they're trying to understand what the next steps are to start their business development in Canada. Any thoughts on what they should be thinking about?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question because we know the intracompany transfer in Canada is a popular category, even for a new office being created in Canada. But we also need to appreciate that there be new guidance in the operational guidelines. And there are special rules, particularly if you're in what we call a 205, a non-trade intracompany transfer. Very particular rules about whether you qualify for creating a branch, and moreover about remote work. These are companies that should have an actual incorporation, a physical office. There should be supervision, direction, control of the workers. But if all of that is structured thoughtfully, then you can in fact create an operation. Usually an executive would come in first, and then your skilled workers could come in provided there's a genuine business reason, for example, client contracts.
Well, let's just discuss that a moment. The first step may be to cite your Indian workers in Canada on an intercompany transfer, but this could be the beginning of a development of a branch office. There are treaties and other provisions that would let your U.S. workers come to Canada to take on very leading roles or significant roles in the business.
Correct. And there are different rules depending on whether it's an intracompany transfer under a trade agreement or under the more regular category, the 205 category.
So Canadian rules are sufficiently flexible that it could accommodate the Indian workers that are now too costly for the United States and the American workers who may come in to provide the leadership or maybe the support of the Indian workers in the expansion of the business.
Correct. And you may get the best of both worlds in that you get those resources who would normally, now in the new rules, you'd have to pay a $100,000 filing fee.
Right.
They're in Canada. They're helping your Canadian operation.
Right.
But they could be providing services to other geographies as well, if structured properly.
So on one hand, the H-1B fee is a burden to U.S. employers. On the other hand, it opens doors.
Right. If structured properly, you might have cost savings, more reliable processing. You're not subject to an annual cap and no lottery as well.
Excellent.
Well, let's continue. Let's assume that you're a U.S. or, as you mentioned, an Indian company. You realize that you're going to have difficulty paying the $100,000 fee for multiple workers, and you're looking at Canada. However, the workers have not qualified yet for the qualifying period of time on an intracompany transfer. They have not yet worked for a year. Well, the other opportunity for a tech company might be to consider the global talent stream, which is an expedited process for obtaining approvals for in-demand STEM and tech workers.
Well, an interesting question was raised during our telephone call. The U.S. company said, look, is Canadian a good place to site our business to work on North American projects in which the benefits go to companies in Canada and in the United States and maybe globally?
Yeah, well, I think that's really important when you're framing your petition and even assessing the suitability for the strategy, is to ensure that there is, in fact, local benefits. But if it turns out that you are providing global services, that can be structured as well.
Excellent. So Canada can meet many objectives, many business objectives.
Right.
Well, I think we're going to stay on this topic for some time to come. Things are going to happen in terms of policy. As America closes its doors, Canada opens its doors.
Correct. And I think even with regard to the PR policy, maybe an opportunity to consider a new category draw for individuals too. So time for a refresh.
Right. Absolutely.
If you're a U.S. employer and you're concerned about the uncertainty around the H-cap and the fees, you should consider Canada as a potential option. We'd be pleased to speak to you about strategies that have worked for many other companies. Please feel free to reach out to greenberghameed.com. Well, why don't you do the intro? You're on such a roll. You're like a rapper.
No, I don't do
rhyming and all that.
I don't do intros.
Yeah, clearly.
Well, today, Noman, big things are happening.
What a great lead-in.
Hi, I'm Howard Greenberg.
Hi, I'm Noman Hameed.
Well, Noman,